Today we discuss the polarization of light, which is one of the phenomena of the light. Now the phenomena of reflection, refraction, interference and diffraction all are sourced by the waves irrespective of their nature, whether they are longitudinal or transverse in nature. The light wave shows the reflection, diffraction, interference, diffraction. Similarly, sound wave also shows all these phenomena: reflection, diffraction, interference, diffraction. So, by observing these phenomena, one cannot infer whether the incoming wave is longitudinal in character or transverse in character. But the phenomena of polarization, it is observed only in case of transverse wave. The light shows polarization. That is, light is nothing but a transverse wave. But the longitudinal wave do not show any polarization. Sound wave never show any polarization. So light wave, actually we know that there is no medium is required for the propagation of the electromagnetic wave or light. Then what is vibrating there? The electric and magnetic fields present in the electromagnetic wave. Actually they are vibrating in a plane perpendicular to the direction of propagation. Suppose the light is traveling along the x-axis, the perpendicular direction to the board is the x-axis, then the electric and magnetic field will vibrate in the plane of the blackboard. This is the yz plane, in all the direction. Suppose this is the yz plane, then the electric field and magnetic fields of the lights will vibrate in all the direction in this plane randomly. So which is a completely unpolarized light. The light which is produced by any ordinary source of light, that is completely unpolarized. That is, all the electric and magnetic fields will vibrate in a plane perpendicular to the direction of propagation randomly. Now, so this kind of light is called the unpolarized light. Unpolarized. Now, by some means, if one can restrict the vibration of the electric and magnetic fields in a preferred direction, in a particular direction, suppose by certain device, if you can make the vibration of the electric field along this direction and the magnetic field in this direction, then this kind of light is called the polarized light. It is plain polarized or linearly polarized light. So, and light may be circularly and elliptically polarized light according as the tip of the resultant electric or the magnetic field vibrate in a circular path or in an elliptical path. Now, the circularly and elliptically polarized lights are produced from the superposition of the two plane polarized lights. Now, what is the definition? We shall first know the definition of the unpolarized light and the plane polarized or linearly polarized lights. Unpolarized light if the vibrations of light waves are equally often in all the directions in a plane which is perpendicular to the direction of propagation, then is called unpolarized light. And light from any ordinary source is an example of unpolarized light. Now similarly, the plane polarized light or linearly polarized light if the vibration of light waves is limited in a preferred direction, in a plane perpendicular to the direction of propagation, then it is called plane polarized or linearly polarized. The light which we obtain from the laser sources, they are highly polarized, highly plane polarized lights. Besides these plane polarized lights or linearly polarized lights, there are also circularly and elliptically polarized lights. The circularly and elliptically polarized lights are produced by the superposition of two linearly polarized lights which are mutually perpendicular to each other. So there are two electric field vectors, one is along x-axis and another is along the y-axis. When they superimpose on each other, then what you get a resultant electric field or magnetic field. And if the tip of that resultant, suppose one is vibrating along this direction, another is in this direction, this is their resultant electric field, suppose Ex and Ey, and this is the resultant. If the tip of this resultant electric field vector is vibrating in a circular path, then it is called the circularly polarized light. And if the tip of this is vibrating in an elliptical path, then it is called an elliptically polarized light. So elliptically and circularly polarized lights are nothing but the interference of two linearly polarized lights mutually perpendicular to each other. We shall see later on how the elliptically and circularly polarized lights are produced. Now first we will discuss how to produce the linearly polarized light by means of simple reflection. Now it is observed that when a light is reflected from a transparent medium, then it is observed that the reflected light is partially polarized. This is the angle of incidence. It is completely unpolarized. Then it is observed that this reflected ray and the refracted rays are partially polarized. It is partially polarized. It it is also partially polarized. Partially polarized means here all the vibrations are random in all the direction. But here you get maybe at an angle of 30 degree or 20 degree or 25 degree you get it's a large number of polarization. That means suppose say 30, it is 30% polarized, not 100% polarized. So people perform the experiment by changing the angle of incidence. Suppose this is a glass plate whose refractive index is mu. Suppose this is your angle of diffraction theta r. Now if we go on changing the angle of incidence, then it is observed, this is from experiment, it is observed that there is a certain angle of incidence for which the reflected light is completely plane polarized with its vibration perpendicular to the plane of incidence. This is the plane of incidence, plane of the blackboard. Its vibration will be perpendicular to the plane of the blackboard and its vibration will be in the plane of the blackboard. So there is a certain angle of incidence for which the reflected or the refracted light is completely plane polarized. For the reflected light, the vibration will be perpendicular to the plane of incidence. So that, and in that case, when the reflected light will be completely plane polarized, then in that case, this reflected and the transmitted rays will be perpendicular to each other. Only in that case, the reflected and the refracted light will be perpendicular to each other when it is completely plane polarized, otherwise not. So the angle of incidence for which the reflected light is completely plane polarized with its vibration perpendicular to the plane of incidence, that angle of incidence is called the angle of polarization for that particular material. Because this angle of polarization is a strong function of the refractive index of the medium from which the reflection is taking place. So if at the angle of polarization theta I, in that case it is written as theta p for the angle of polarization. So at the angle of polarization, if we use the Snell's law, now there is particular angle of incidence for which the reflected light is completely plane polarized. With its vibration perpendicular to the plane of incidence. And this angle of incidence is called angle of polarization. Theta p. Now and this angle of polarization depends on the material. It is a strong function of the material. Now, and at that case, when the angle of incidence is equal to the angle of polarization, then in that case the reflected and the transmitted waves will be perpendicular to each other. So at the angle of polarization, the reflected and refracted waves are normal to each other. This is the observation, experimental observation. Now if this is 90 degree, then theta, this is theta p in this case now, angle of polarization. So theta p, we get theta p, this is theta p, plus theta r plus 90 degree, that is equal to 180 degree. That is, you get theta p or theta r is equal to 90 minus theta p. So at the angle of polarization, the angle of refraction is 90 minus theta p. Now we use the Snell's law, that is sin I by sin r, sin theta p by sin r is equal to mu. Now from Snell's law, there is sin theta p by sin r, that is equal to mu. What is sin r? Sin r is 90 minus theta p. Substitute it here. So you get sin theta p by sin of 90 minus theta p is equal to mu. Sin of 90 minus theta, so you get cos theta, you get sin theta p by cos theta p, that is equal to mu, is equal to tan theta p. So this tan theta p is equal to mu is the Brester's law. So according to Brester, the tangent to the angle of polarization is equal to the refractive index of the medium. So this is called the Brester's law. So according to Brester, the tangent to the angle of polarization is equal to the refractive index of the medium with respect to surroundings. Now this is from the experiment. The Brester's law is defined, that is by observing from the experiment that at the angle of polarization the reflected and the transmitted rays are normal to each other. Now in the reverse direction, if Wester's law is given, then one can prove that at the angle of polarization, the reflected and the transmitted rays are normal to each other. That means if we write from Wester's law that tan theta p that is equal to mu, that is equal to from Snell's law sin theta p by sin r. This is sin theta p by cos theta p, that is equal to sin theta p by sin r. That is cos theta p is equal to, that means sin r, or you can write it sin r is equal to 90 minus r. Cos of 90 minus r, so theta p is equal to 90 minus r. So theta p plus r will be equal to 90 degree. That means they are perpendicular to each other. Now, Brester's law, tan theta p is equal to mu. It has the advantage over the Snell's law, because for Snell's law, one has to find the angle of refraction, and that is possible in case of transparent medium. If the medium is opaque, suppose the light is reflecting from a very polished metal surface, where it is difficult to trace the refracted ray. Now in that case, the one has to apply the Brester's law to find the refractive index of the opaque material, because here no need to find the angle of refraction. So Brester's law is applicable. Is very useful. To find the refractive indices of opaque materials. So this is the importance of the Brester's law, that for the opaque materials, one can find the refractive index of that medium by applying the Brester's law. Now, so this is the technique how the plane polarized light can be produced by simple reflection. Now, besides this, there are polarizers. There are so many organic materials from which the polarizers are produced for producing the plane polarized lights. But in early days, the wire grid polarizers were used. What is wire grid polarizer? Now suppose if we place a large number of fine wires, there is a mesh of fine wires of good conductor. Suppose these wires are made up of silver, the good conductor. This is for the wire grid polarizer. Wire grid. Suppose it is made up of silver. Now, if there are 30,000 lines per inch, and if if a plain electromagnetic wave, unpolarized light will pass through this, then the emergent light will be plain polarized light with its vibration perpendicular to the wire. Now, if a plain polarized light is falling on it, suppose the electric field of that plain polarized light falls here. This is the electric field. Now the electric field will decompose into two, one along the wire and one perpendicular to the direction of the wire. The component of the electric field which is along the wire, that will act on the free charges on this good conductor, and that will die out. And only this normal component will pass through this. So after passing through this wire grid polarizer, you get a light whose electric field will vibrate only in this direction. All other components will cut. Now, but this type of polarizer is not very economical. You see here 30,000 lines per inch is there, and is a good conductor still, but it is too costly. So nowadays the polarizers are used made up of several metal oxides or from organic materials. Now suppose if an unpolarized light is coming, we place here a polarizer. This is the optic axis of the crystal. Optic axis. The optic axis is the direction within the crystal which allows to pass the vibration which is parallel to it. Other vibration will cut. So all these vibration whose component is along this direction, they will pass and others will be eliminated. So in that case, after passing through this polarizer, you get the electric fields of the waves only in this direction, which is parallel to the optic axis of this crystal. So here you get a linearly polarized light. So suppose here the intensity of this linearly polarized light is I0. Now another polarizer, which you call actually the analyzer here in this case, is placed in this way, which makes an angle theta with the initial one. This angle is theta. Then what will be the intensity here? I. Because its optic axis is obliquely placed with this at an angle theta, so only its vibration which is parallel to this, that will be allowed to pass, otherwise not. Let the A is the, suppose the S is the amplitude here. Now then only the component of the amplitude which is S cos theta will be passed through this. So here the intensity, suppose say I, but here the amplitude will be equal to S cos theta. S cos theta component will be allowed to pass through this polarizer, which we call say analyzer actually, because it is analyzing the light. So initially let the amplitude of the initial wave here be S and intensity say I0. Then what we write that the intensity is proportional to the square of the amplitude. So I0 is proportional to S square, intensity is proportional to the square of the amplitude. And after emerging from the analyzer after emerging from analyzer, we have, that is I, the intensity here is proportional to, this is the amplitude, S square cos square theta. So the ratio of these two, it is I by I0, that will be equal to, you get S square cos square theta by A square, you get cos square theta. So I equal to I0 initial intensity into cos square theta. So amplitude will decrease in this way. Now, so this is for the Malus law, how the intensity is varied. If your theta is equal to 0, then only you get I equal to I0. That means both the optic axis of the polarizer and analyzer are parallel to each other. Then the same intensity will pass. And if theta is equal to 90 degree, that means the initial polarizer and analyzer are crossed. Then there will be no intensity. Then in that case, your I will be equal to 0. So how the intensity of the polarized light vary? This is given by the Malus law. Now, this is called the polarized light because initially the light intensity I0, that light was polarized light. But if an unpolarized light falls on a polarizer, then what will be the intensity after passing? This is a completely unpolarized light. Vibration is in all the direction. Suppose its intensity is I0. Ordinary light coming from a bulb or from a tube, this is the intensity of it. Now it is passing through a polarizer. So only the components of the all vibration whose components are parallel to this, they will pass. So here the vibration is random. So average intensity here that will pass, or the amplitude, that will be equal to I0 by 2. So when a completely unpolarized light is passing through any polarizer, its intensity will become half. Okay. So initially it is I0, now after passing through the polarizer it becomes I0 by 2. Now this is how the intensity is varied. Now there are certain, it is also observed that there are certain crystals like say calcium carbonate, which is called calcite. The calcium carbonate crystal or quartz, or sometimes ice, mica, etc. These crystals produces 2 refracted rays instead of 1 when the light passes through it. Suppose this is the normal, incident ray is falling on it. Now here instead of, generally in glass plate we get say 1 refracted ray, but instead of 1 in such crystals we get 2 refracted rays. But with their vibrations perpendicular to each other and both are completely plane polarized. One has the vibration perpendicular to the plane of incidence and another in the plane of incidence. So the ray which is vibrating perpendicular to the plane of incidence is called the ordinary ray. and other that is called the extraordinary or E ray. So why it is called ordinary ray and why it is extraordinary ray? Because this ray, whose vibration is perpendicular to the plane of incidence, it obeys all the ordinary laws of refraction, but it does not obey the ordinary laws of refraction. Now, so here there are certain crystals in which two refracted rays are produced. Within certain crystals, one of these two refracted rays obeys ordinary laws of refraction, called ordinary, or say simply O-ray, and the other one which does not obey ordinary laws of refraction, called the extraordinary ray. Extraordinary ray, or simply the E ray. And both these rays are completely plane polarized with their vibrations perpendicular to each other. All these rays are completely plane polarized. Now, why two kinds of refracted rays are generated within the crystal? That is first explained by Huygens by his wave theory. Why two kinds of, instead of one, why two kinds of refracted rays are generated? Now, this is first explained by Huygens theory. Huygens theory. According to Huygens, we know that the obstruction, any obstruction in the path of the light is a source of secondary wave front. If there is any obstruction, light is going in the air, now there is a glass plate, then at that obstruction, point of obstruction, the secondary wave fronts will be generated. So Huygens said that any obstruction in the path of the light in the doubly refracting crystal is a source of two kinds of secondary wave fronts. Instead of one, two kinds of secondary wave fronts will be generated. Suppose a calcium carbonate crystal, calcite, on which when the light falls, it is a point of obstruction. So from here, two kinds of wavefronts will be generated. One is spherical in nature and another is spheroidal in nature. That is, an ellipse is revolving. Now, the wavefront of the ordinary ray is spherical in nature and it has the same velocity in all the direction within the crystal. But the wavefront for the extraordinary ray, which is spheroidal in nature, and it has different velocities in different direction within the crystal. And these two wavefronts, they are generated from the same point. One is sphere, another is spheroidal. So there is a possibility that these two wavefronts, the sphere and the spheroid, touch each other at 2 points. That means in the plane of the blackboard there is a circle and another is an ellipse. If we take the cross section. So these two wavefronts must touch each other at 2 points, and the line joining these 2 points, it gives the optic axis of the crystal. So optic axis of the crystal is a direction along which there will be no double diffraction. No double diffraction will be observed because both the ray will travel with the same velocity. So you get the same refractive index along this direction. Now what is Huygens theory? The first point, the assumption on this is any point within the crystal is a source of two kinds of wavefront. The wavefront for the ordinary ray is spherical in nature. And the wavefront for the extraordinary ray is spheroid in nature. And these two wavefronts touch each other number 4. These two wavefronts touch each other at 2 points, and the line joining these two gives the direction of the optic axis. Of the crystal. So optic axis of the crystal is a direction within the crystal along which there will be no double refraction. Now, so if there are two kinds of wavefronts in a crystal, one is spheroid, another is sphere. So there are two possibilities. Either the sphere lies within the spheroid, within the ellipse, or the ellipse lies within the sphere. So accordingly, according to these situations, the crystals are classified. So in the next class we shall discuss the crystals in which this situation is there and the crystal in which this situation is there. Okay.